Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. As I said, I'm Niki, and I'm a material artist at Frontier Developments. I'm going to be talking a bit about my career, but I've done that for a few different talks. So this time I've decided to do a presentation. A lot of people requested that I do show how I do trim sheets because I do quite a lot of them. So I'll do a quick, let's say 20-ish minute presentation on my career, my journey, and my how I approach Zoom sheets. And then we're gonna jump into Designer on a freshly new empty file. So you can kind of follow along my thought process. I haven't prepared anything inside of Designer just so you can kind of see how I think while I'm doing these materials and trim sheets. So we can do a very quick demonstration until the time runs off. So uh, yeah, let's start with it. Just let me know when you can see my screen so I can kind of continue with the presentation and we can get on with it. So I take it you can see my screen now. Yeah, perfect. So uh, I've worked in front-end developments for the last 4 years. I've worked on Jurassic World Evolution 2, Formula One Manager 2022, and a little bit on the 2023 version. I've worked on Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin, which is my favorite project ever to have worked on. It was the blast, a lot of fun, a lot of stuff to do, and I'm currently working on the newly announced Planet Coaster 2 that we're going to be seeing a lot more at Gamescom this week and a lot more soon. So all of these games are completely different in terms of style. So as a material artist, I have to be able to quickly adapt to how any of these games work and how they look and all the system behind like shaders and how everything inside of the game works. So that's very important for me as a material artist. In terms of my education, I studied computer science at the University of Ruse, and then I wrote my final thesis in the University of Coimbra in Portugal. I like to include this because my final thesis is a 82-page PDF file about procedural distribution and generating of real-time environments. It's completely free on my Gumroad. Anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about all of these topics that include Substance, Quixel, Houdini, Unreal, and all other kinds of stuff, you can kind of check it out free. So go for it if you find that useful. In my career, I started working when I was at uni at a few startup companies. I started working at a company called Velocity Venture for technical environment audits, where we did kind of real estate environments in VR, one of the early VRs in Unreal. Then I moved to another startup called V-Media, which I was an environment audit at. Their main environment audit doesn't mean what you think it means here, because we were basically doing everything from coding, texturing, sculpting, whatever you can think of. Then I joined Kitbash 3D as a texture artist for a brief period of time. And after that, I moved on to Frontier Developments, where I have been there for the last 4 years. And I'll show you a bit of what I did at these places. Kitbash, we did a lot of textures for their kits. If you're familiar with Kitbash, they sell a bunch of kits that you can kind of populate your scene very quickly, and it's used in a lot of films and a lot of games. After that, I moved on to Frontier, where I joined and worked on Jurassic World Evolution 2. Here you can see some examples of the materials I did. These were those very complex layer materials where we're using parallax occlusion mapping to kind of fake damage. So we saved a lot of time on not modeling the damage on buildings and using these textures with the parallax stuff. You can see some more examples of the materials that I've done there. Okay, moving on to the Formula One manager, I was responsible for texturing all the different F1 cars, all the different tires, a lot of the curves, and a lot of the surfaces in the games. The F1 cars were definitely quite an experience because we got to work with all of the F1 teams very closely, so that all the colors, all the sponsors, all the surface response was correct and how they wanted it. So that was quite fun. These are some of the trim sheets we did for the curbs. That was a massive challenge because me and a friend of mine called James Mitchell worked together to bring something around 200 different curbs in around 6 trims into the game for about 2 months. We had to develop a system where we had different curbs in different sections, and different curbs can be shared between some tracks, but couldn't be shared among others. So we managed to do these trim sheets and models in about 2 months. So that's like 60 trim sheets and 200 different curves. And these are a perfect examples of what I'm going to be talking today about. So how to plan for these, how to make them. A lot of people are quite daunted by the idea of making trim sheets. So yeah, I was telling you about these curves in the F1. It kind of seems like in every track on Formula One, each corner has a slightly different curve. So we have to do all these, we have to plan for these, and basically a huge amount of work. We have to compress it down to 2 months worth of work. So 200 curves, 60 different textures, and trim sheets. So today I'm going to be trying to kind of demystify how trim sheets are made and show you that it's not that scary. You just have to plan for them well. And I'm going to do a demonstration after the presentation to show you how we can do exactly that. Moving on, here's some of the other work from F1, the tires, which was kind of made like a thin sheet. Not exactly, but quite close. Here you can see more of my work on Warhammer Realms of Ruin. Here we used a lot of thin sheets, a lot of different outputs. So that's a great example of all the stuff we did. I'll show you more in a bit. Here's a bit more examples of that. And here are some of the trim sheets I was telling you about in Warhammer. So you can see quite a few different varieties of stone, metals, gold. We're gonna kind of explore more how we can achieve these different results inside of Designer. All of these are completely done inside of certain Designer. So we're gonna be talking more about that in a second. I've included this on the previous presentations that I've done of what makes a good portfolio from a bigger artist perspective. You should be able to show that you can adapt to different styles. As I mentioned earlier, at Frontier we work in a variety of different projects with different styles. So you should be able to kind of adapt to those styles, and you have to show that into your portfolio. Your portfolio has to be relevant, so using the latest tech, the latest techniques. You have to have quality stuff, not a lot of quantity, so show that you can kind of uh, do a couple of projects, but do them very well. You should also emphasize on storytelling. How is this, for example, material used? What's the mood and what's the spaces they're going to be used? You have to show your breakdown. You have to show that you understand how physically based rendering is working, and variety is also good. Having organics, art surface, landscapes, theme sheets, especially and atlases, which we're going to be covering today. So that is all very important. And one of the most important things is presentation. I see a lot of portfolios where they have like keyword work, but it's probably poorly lit or not presented very well. And that brings the overall quality very nice. And if you take somebody who has not a great work, but he's presented it very nice, that portfolio is going to stand a lot more than all the other ones. And while we're doing our portfolios, the main goal is to stand out, and that's how you would potentially get hired. And now that we're hiring for material artists at Frontier, we're looking exactly for that. People who know how to adapt to styles and the portfolios that stand out and show us that they can do the job. So that's quite important. Team sheets. So the team sheets and how to prompt them, it's a lot easier than you think. The first thing is you have to really know how your concept is gonna look, how your mesh is gonna look, and you start the trim sheet after your mesh is done, and not the other way around. A lot of people use those custom nodes that make trim sheets from different spacings and stuff. I personally really don't like that because I find it a bit overwhelming and not very flexible. And I'll show you. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'll show you what I personally like to do. And the most important thing is to have the mesh ready beforehand, and then lay your UVs into strips, and after that, bring that into Designer and work from there. So as an example of one of the trims we did here, if the scopes were baked from a high poly scope, then everything else was generated inside of Designer based on those uh, different UV strips that I just mentioned. Is another example of a similar trim sheet. So uh, you can see all the different materials, surfaces, bevels. The most important thing for a trim is the actual bevels and not that much information inside of it. Although the information is very good, you have to plan for those exact bevels, where they're going to be and how they're going to be emphasizing your mesh. Here is another more interesting theme. A lot of people are asking about how to make these circular ones. And the circular ones are not much different than the other ones. You have to lay everything in strips. And the smaller the strips, the better, because that way you're going to have a greater you're not going to have much difference between the outer angle and the inner angle. So usually the inner radius of a strip is going to be always smaller than the outer one, which is going to kind of stretch your UVs. So there's no way around it. And you have to be wary about that stretching. And the smaller the strip, the less noticeable that's going to be. But here, because this is like a real piece, a real miniature from Warhammer, we have to make it the exact same way Dave made it. So here we got into a bit of a problem where the outer radius was quite larger than the inner radius, because this is a very big strip. Ideally, we would want breakup between the UVs, so and some edges, so that we break up that stretching. And you can even see it in some of these stars here, where it's not exactly perfect. But what we did here to kind of get around it is, because it was stretched so much from the UVs and there's no way around it. I went in Designer and staged the texture the opposite way. So the moment you apply that onto the mesh, it's gonna stretch back to kind of the correct size. So that's how you get a more nicer transition between the outer and the inner radius. And going back one slide here, you can kind of see that's the material itself. And we have these different objects which are placed on a bunch of planes, so they don't get distorted as well. So we can kind of layer stuff with planes and with opacity, which is very helpful. This is a object that's almost entirely made out of trim sheets, and I've put it here because a lot of the trim sheets I'm going to show you later are used in this object. When I first saw the concept art for this one, well, it looked quite similar to the mesh itself. But I was tasked to kind of make a plan on how to tackle these, how to make this into trim sheet, because this is huge. It's like 8 meters tall. So when you put it in Painter, and if it has to be in textile density, even 4K maps are not gonna cut it. So 4K maps is quite a lot. Everything here uses like a 1K map. So I'm gonna be trying to kind of show you how I've gone for this. So looking at this one, we can kind of try to see uh, which ones are using trim sheets and which ones are using tileables. So for example, here we can quickly identify uh, like these bits over here. So we're gonna try to end up pack this into texture where all of these are going to be out of something that's going to be part of the trim sheet. This here is also like one continuous trim, so it's very good to plan. And here, this is part of an atlas, so that goes on top of the other as a separate mesh. Looking at this sigil here, we don't want this to be a decal, because when you have a few stuff overlaying, you might have some issues. So we can put this on a trim sheet that has the underlying texture, and also we can have a separate bit of that sheet having the same texture but without the sigil, which is going to be heavily reused in all the bits. And I'll show you just in a little bit how that works into a trim sheet. And here, if we're continuing to plan for this, we can kind of see that this whole circle over here is again one big trim sheet that we're gonna use. And this is the first trim sheet. You can see all the details that are here, and not only here, this is shared between other assets as well. So this is separated onto different bits so that they can either be put on that sheet. And here you can see the little flames that were on that mesh, and the little strips, the gold strips, the concrete ones. Everything goes into the right place, and then you have an asset that's only using like 1K textures and 512 textures instead of a bunch of uniquely textured 4K assets, which is gonna tank your memory usage quite a lot. And this is the other example that I was thinking about, how we have a sigil here on top of the texture, which is used on that side bit a little bit earlier. So right here, right on this little bit here. And then we have all this empty space on this sheet, which is gonna be used on the other bits right here. So bits underneath here and the bits here, and that way you're saving so much space instead of using a bunch of textures, a bunch of models. You're putting everything on just one texture. So this whole object is using, I think it's using around 3 different textures, and 2 of them are 24 and one is like 512. So it's highly optimized for what we want, and we're not using a ton of memory for it. And I think that's enough talking, and I'll probably start to show you how that works inside of Substance Designer. Everybody able to see my Substance Designer windows here?
Yep, I can see it. Can everyone else see?
Perfect.
Yeah, it looks like we can. Great.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna be quite fast in my workflow, so don't take this as a tutorial that you can follow step by step. I just want to show you how this works. But if anybody has any questions after this, I can walk you through how each of those nodes work and how everything here is done. So this is a completely empty graph, for exception of a base material. Base material we're just gonna be using for to preview everything. So if I plug anything into it, it's gonna be shown on the mesh here. So pretty simple stuff. And I've prepared a very simple model. So this is a cylinder with a few extrusions, nothing fancy. And I've just UV'd this into different strips. So what we can do here is we can display UVs into the view. And now we can kind of click on this one here. And now we can see the UVs. What I try to do with scripts is I try to scale them a little bit, maybe 20% of texel density, so that they can match if you imagine here, the second square. So this is going to be tiling, even though it's like 2 times bigger. And what I try to do is basically match this. So I lay everything into strips and I decide what I want to have on each strip. And on these strips, I basically use as guides where I want to put bevels, and everything else we can kind of put on these textures. So what I like to do first is I go into the bake tabs and I'm gonna add the opacity baker, and I'm gonna use the use lowest high definition model. So when I bake this, I have exactly where I want these strips to be. So here we have a bunch of gaps in between these, but it's going to be easier to show you that way. Ideally, when we're making prints, we want everything to be as closely packed together because that extra space is quite precious. And on top of here, we can use this as an atlas, put some bolts, put something else in here, and work from there. We're going to be using this as a guide of where we want stuff to be. And if I do a flood fill, well, the flood fill sometimes doesn't work that well. So if we do it like this, and we do flood fill to grayscale, and we put a gradient on it, that way each one of them will have like a different gradient, but in a different in like a stepping direction. So if we use a histogram select, we can kind of select which strip we want. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, which is very useful. And the other thing we can kind of do is do a flood fill to random scale. Sorry, not random scale, flood fill to random color. It's gonna give us an idea of how our colors work. So if I enable base color in this, and I plug it in here, we can see how this one. Apologies. Yeah. Yeah, we can see where each of these colors would go. So one thing to fix these block lines is to do the same thing we did here, but just switch it out and we can plug it in. And now we can kind of visualize where each one of these is going. But yeah, let's start with, let's say, the first piece. So if I get like do a shape here, we can kind of see how this works. Right. So what I want to do in the beginning is I want to make a gradient node, and that's a very important step. And I want to use a transform node and scale this quite low. I then gonna go to the tiling mode and go to a just one horizontal tiling. I don't care about the vertical one. And then I wanna see where I can match this to these UVs. So here we're doing a little bit of manual work until we kind of match it. And this seems pretty spot on, so pretty close to what we want. So what we can do.
Real quick, 1 second. Apparently, if you turn your camera off, more people can join. So.
Oh, okay.
If you could pop your camera off. Thank you. Sorry about that. Keep going.
It's fine. Yeah. So continuing with this, that's a pretty simple setup, but now we can from those beautiful bevels. So we can start with this and curve node, which is gonna let us curve this the way we kind of want. The curve node is a bit annoying because you have to make this very huge to actually see what you're doing. Otherwise, it's not that ideal, but it is quite worth it. So if we go to here, we can kind of see what we're doing here with these bevels. So now we have two very small bevels that we can use for this bit of the trim. It's all about matching the bevels themselves. So we wanna look at the profile of this. Also, it's also very you can get with the cross section nodes, so you can also see what you're doing there. So you can kind of see bevels. But yeah, moving here, just repeating what we did a little bit ago. So let's say that this is cache. That's gonna be the first step in making this. So let's preview this on a see what's going on here. So if we plug this in, and if I now have like this the bevel script, now we can kind of start destroying it a little bit. So what I'm gonna start doing is I wanna use a scope war, which is one of my favorite nodes, but I use it in a little bit of a different way. It's usually used to kind of keep your edges. We're gonna do something similar to that, but with a bunch of nodes that are quite swath in different directions. So I use something like this, which is gonna give us funky results in the beginning, but you have to just help me on this that this is gonna work out well. I already see some of those results. We're gonna drop a few more of those. So that's a little bit of edge damage here. Now we can kind of plug this in and start seeing what we're doing. So this is too strong. So we have to kind of adjust it until we find something useful. So that's starting to look like something, but not quite. We have to. It's very small numbers. We don't want to go overboard. Anything with designer, you don't want to add too much of it. Just a little bit of edge damage, a little bit of echo here and there, then you can get some quite nice results. Which these results are gonna get picked up later by a generator we're gonna make. So it's all about experimenting and finding what's right for you. So something like this will start working nicely for us. And we wanna kind of try a few different things. For example, I wanna make a let's say I wanna put some pyramid shapes in the middle of it. I wanna do it in something like this. I'm gonna do a tile generator, which is gonna be it'll do something like this. I'm gonna do a blend. I can put these on top, and how about do the scale here? We can kind of put these in the middle. And we can use our original mask here. So we can kind of mask this out. The tile generator is a lot better to use for those familiar with Designer, just because it's a lot cheaper than the tile sampler in terms of time. And when you make huge graphs like I do, it's quite worth it usually. So we can kind of play with this a little bit more. And now we have like some idea of what we're doing. So one of the issues with this is that these the height of these pyramids is quite lower than the height of the trim. So we can come back here, select these 2 points, drag this a little bit downwards, and it's gonna be seeing a lot more from these pyramid shapes. What I want to kind of do is maybe push this a little bit more so that we don't see these shapes on the top. So we do something like this, and now we have these beautiful shapes here. We can then use the same noises we did here, but with different values, and way we can kind of get a little bit of a damage on top of them. And using these existing ones, we now have a little bit of damage. Once we don't want to go overboard on it, you can see quickly starts getting these warp shapes. So we want to be very subtle with all the noise we're going to be using. Playing with the values until we have something that kind of works for us. So this is something that is working. Now we can kind of get a histogram select node, and we can kind of play with selecting what we want here in the middle. And when we do a contrast node, we can kind of get all these over here. And I'll show you what to do with the different nodes here. So one of my favorite nodes to use is called reaction diffusion, I think. Yeah, like reaction diffusion path, which if we get a Gaussian noise or something like this, will give us this very, very funky result, which is going to give you, if we play with it a little bit more, it's going to give you this really nice lines. We can then use an edge detect to throw how much we want from that. So something like this. And we can kind of multiply this and use it over here. So you can see exactly what we're kind of doing. We can use this as a map. And actually, I'm going to subtract this from there. And you can kind of see now we have like this very, very interesting pattern, which we can work a little bit more with the slope work or whatnot, depending on what you want to do. And get something related to this, which is already working nicely. So the next bit is gonna be a little bit of one of my favorite nodes. It's called a metal edgeware, and we're not gonna be using it for metal. Spoiler alert. A lot of the nodes I like to use in Designer are not meant to be used for this, but I do like to experiment a lot in Designer and see some good results. Designer doesn't crash. It tends to get quite shy when people are watching. It happens a lot at work. Apparently, it happens here. So bear with me. Oh, cool. Didn't crash. That's positive. So I'm going to get this shape that we just did, and I'm gonna use gonna get a normal. From then I'm gonna get a curvature smooth, and I'm gonna get a curvature normal curvature. So one of the things that one of the things that you would see here is that this curvature here is not working correctly, and that's because we set this node over here to absolute. And what we can do here is just select this, click absolute, and that's gonna give us the correct curvature. Now I wanna kind of increase the normal here to something more substantial, so we can kind of pick up the curvature. And I want to mix these two together, something like this, where we have both of these together, kind of. Then I want to get the same thing with an ambient occlusion. When I'm using generators, I like to exaggerate the ambient occlusion nodes. But when you're making your final ambient occlusion, be sure to use these real size units because they're gonna give you the correct ambience. Your final AO map shouldn't have a lot of blocks in it because that's gonna make a lot of render issues. So be mindful. But now because we're doing a generator, we can use this incorrect AO node and plug it into metal edgeware. The metal edgeware, we want to reduce the grunge, and we only want to be using these parameters here, the edge smoothness and all the wear level, and that's going to highlight our edges, which is going to be very useful when you're working in games where you're using like 1024 textures, 512 textures. Highlighting your bevels just a little bit, not too much, will kind of fake sharpness. It's called perceived sharpness. That's going to give us a very sharp bevel. But what we want to achieve on top of that is if I get another toolbar, can kind of get it. This is one of my favorite nodes because you can do a lot of stuff with it and plug another quartz noise into it. We're now getting a totally new edge. So we're getting this edge that we don't have on the normal shape we just did. So now we have highlighted a little bit of a different edge. So when I put this over here and click add on it, you can kind of add a little bit of those edges on top of it. You can kind of see how this is working. So we don't want it that harsh, just want a little bit of it. And maybe we can reduce this effect here. Now, you do have these up lines that are top of everything else, which will give it quite a sharper look when you end up exporting this. But this is a little bit too much. I warned you that you shouldn't apply that much of it. And you want to apply with a little bit of these parameters. You only have it in some of these places. I don't really like what we've done here with this pulse noise, so I'm gonna reduce it a little bit. And now we have a trim bit that's quite a lot sharper than what we started with. And now we wanna kind of make some noises that we can put on top of that. So that let's assume that this is made out of stone and only these in the middle are made of something like metal. So I'm going to show you some of my favorite ways to generate new noises. I don't like using the animate noises that much just because they are way too obvious. Like sometimes when I'm looking at portfolios of people, I can clearly see what noise they've used and want to have some variety. So yeah, I'm putting these three notes in here. And I'm putting this third noise into the opacity channel. So now I'm blending these three in quite a natural way. And then I'm going to use an also word, but this time it's not for edges. It's basically to generate an entirely new noise, which is very, very good for making concrete. So something like this will work quite nicely. And then I'm going to make another noise with a few of the grunge maps. This is one of my favorite notes here. And we can kind of combine this here, this one here. And then I can use a grunge. It was called a grunge from 9, maybe. Sometimes you have to kind of guess. Working with designer for so much time, and I still can't remember half of these. So we're now using a shape plotter circuit. If you do want to interrupt me for some reason, feel free to do so, just because I keep on rambling about stuff here in Designer, but it might not be so obvious to some people. Yeah, I'm doing like these altering these here to create entirely new noise. So I want to get this to quite a bigger level. I'm gonna play with these parameters and run them. So bear with me for a second. Now I'm gonna do our pattern rotation random, and this is gonna give us a quite an interesting noise that we can kind of use. I want to kind of get more pattern amounts here. Uh, that kind of works. I'm gonna randomize this. That's perfect. And I just want to over it again for a little bit of a softening effect. So if you blur the second input of a slow blur, it's gonna inflate the shape a bit. It's useful for some stuff, for some organics. You just want to be a little bit softer here, just a tiny bit. So the values here are gonna be quite low. Oops, yeah, something like that works. Because these guns maps are very sharp, and we don't want overly sharpened stuff. So yeah, we can now test this. One tiny mistake I made here is that if these are going to be metallic, I don't want them up white that early in the graph. So if I move this here and just move this after this, yeah, now we can kind of play a little bit more with these. Yeah, okay, that's perfect. Now we can kind of get this shape here, and we can start adding our noises. So we want to subtract a tiny bit of this noise, which already will give us a decent result. But I don't want that. So here is a tiny issue. So whenever you have something completely white like this here, it's going to be completely subtracted, and we don't really want that. I'm going to use a histogram select, which is going to kind of allow me to use some bits of it, but not entirely white. And that's going to give me a little bit of a softer approach. And then I'm going to do how much I'm subtracting. As I said, we just only want little bits of information subtracted. And then we can add this noise, which is quite nice for concrete kind of stuff. And we can want to be multiplying it a little bit, just a tiny little bit. Now you can see how this is turning out to be quite a decent trim. And now we can come back here and see if there's a need for us to get these sieved edges a little bit sharper. Not that much, to be honest. The other thing we can do is we can get this curvature, and we can get a node called edge speckle. I have to see which of the curvature is going to work fine. I think both of them are going to be working fine. The edge speckle is just going to give you quite a nice an edge notch as well. They're both going to give you quite nice information on the edges, just to add it on top. Yeah, the edge notch is quite nice. So and when we put it in, this kind of gets nice little bit of chipping from the edges, just some of the edges, but not on all of them. And yeah, this seems to be working quite nicely. Right. So, and on these here, we can kind of maybe leave them like that for now. The last thing we can do on this bit of the trim sheet is I'm gonna be using a tape, and I'm gonna be using the paraboard, and I'm gonna use a normal gradient node, and I'm going to set that to min, which is gonna give us this kind of oval shape, which is has a gradient on one side of it. And then I'm gonna use a tile sampler, which kind of make like few of these. Random, position random, offset, rotation random, mask random, color random. We can scale it down a little bit more, and then we can kind of use a warp node. And this warp node we're gonna be plugging into a Gaussian noise. So this is gonna give us that's not ideal. So let's do another Gaussian noise at the bigger scale. Just want some of these to be a little bit stretched, and then we can kind of subtract it. The benefit of this, instead of doing like normal dots, is that this is quite a lot softer and it's very natural when you're doing rock formations. So now we can kind of see where we have a little bit of these holes here, but these are quite big, and we don't want them on the metallic bits. So we're gonna be putting it right over here. So going back here, we can kind of reduce the scale of them, add a little bit more scale random, then use a little bit of a more mask random, and that's going to give us a little bit of more extra detail. We don't want to go overboard with it, so mindful. And we can kind of consider this at least done for the height map of this little bit. We can also open up the metallic channel, and when we blend this over here, we can kind of have this be the metallic channel. So you can now see how this bit of the trim sheet is working. Oh, right. So if we consider this bit of the trim sheet done, we can kind of do this. So I want to put this into a frame and call this concrete. And I want to put this into a frame and call trim sheet 1. And now the easiest thing we can do is we can either duplicate the whole thing for the next bit, or we can kind of add again from this here. Now we have to put the cylinder back in. Not entirely sure why it's doing scale so much. 1 second to check. Yeah. Also now you can see this perfectly working on here. It has bevels where we want the bevels to be. It has edge damage where we want the edge damage to be. So that's a very, very quick example of how we can do this part of the trim sheet. For the next bit, I wanna have this down here. So let's see how we can achieve that. We again have to go in here, display UVs, display the UVs here, and let me see which one was this one. I believe it was this here, but not entirely sure. We can test real quick. Maybe not that one. Bear with me for a second. Yeah, with this one, I think. Let's go with this one, and if it's not, it's not fine. You then have to again scale this back up just so we have the correct scale for everything. And I'll show you how to make some cool bricks here. So these here we can kind of again use this curve node again to start making these edges where we want to have them. I have a curved edge here, so we'll do something like this. Then the next edge is going to be somewhere like over here. And then the next one, we don't want to be curved. So the next one's going to be right over here. Next one's going to be here. Like this. There you have it. We have another trim bit. So now I'm gonna go back to a plain high res, and we're gonna see what we're dealing with here. So now we have this rather nice shape. I wanna separate part of it. So I'm going to be, let's see what we can do. So I'm kind of get this edge over here, and this edge is going to act like something, our separating line. So we can kind of work with the top bit first and then move to the other bits. So right now what we can do is either we can do a histogram select and let us select this bit, or maybe not. In this case, we can do a histogram scan. That's gonna select both of these like this. I'm gonna do a transform node. I'm gonna reduce this again because otherwise the flood through is not gonna work. So it's a bit tricky sometimes, but this is a way to kind of get around it. Flood fill to random grayscale, and then we can kind of go back to the transform node, scale this back up so we can use it properly. We're gonna do a histogram select, and now we can choose which mask we want to generate. So now we can just work with this one. So that's a quick way of generating different masks. After this, I'm going to copy some of the nodes from here. So the beautiful thing about design is that you can reuse a lot of stuff once you've made a few of those. So let's say something like this, already working quite nicely. Now what I want to do is I want to use a tile generator, and I want to do something like, I want to have X amount. Let's say X is a good number. I'm gonna use this as a square. The square is a bit sharper than the brick, and I'm gonna do 0.9 here. Well, 0.9 is not that good. 0.99 maybe. Something like this. A lot of fiddling with numbers in Designer. So what I want to do, copy these again. Use this in here. Maybe be more aggressive with this noise. Yeah, something like this. And then I want to multiply this, but multiply it only on, sorry, not here. Multiply it only on the bevel over here. So we don't want this bit here, sorry. So yeah, if we multiply this, now we have bricks. And those bricks have nice, interesting gaps in between them. But what I would like to do is maybe use a bevel node here, which is going to kind of increase and get rid of this gap almost. We also have to be careful with that so it doesn't get too soft. So now you have these interesting brick patterns, but we can take this a step further. So I'm going to be using a flip fill again. And this flip fill, I'm going to be multiplying this first with this. So that we only have this. That's flat fill. Now we can do a few interesting things, like a flat fill to random grayscale, and then a flat fill to gradient. And then we can start multiplying these over here. It's going to give us like some interesting stuff. We want to do this. Right? And then we want to add this on top of here. And we want to have this select only the top layer here. Now, when we plug this back in, let me just plug some height in again, just so you can see what we are doing. Now those bricks are quite wanted, so that's gonna give us quite a nice breakup when the light hits it in game, for example. One thing that now is an issue is one second to show you here is now we have this hash line and we don't really want to have that line. So there are two different ways to deal with it. One is to either use a nice mask which has this edge in here, or the other way is to use a distance node and connect these shapes together like this. Now we should get those that information. Yep, with it. Now we do have nicer, I think, stone material. So I'm gonna use a levels node. Just bring this up. Then we're gonna blend this on top of with the other one, just because I want one of those to be higher. So I have to, yeah, do something like this. Now this is working a lot nicer. Obviously, this is a bit exaggerated, so we can always come back and reduce how much of the swamp we want in there. So yeah, that's already working quite nicely for what we're doing. So what we're gonna be doing now next is we're just gonna copy it over here. So something like this, put it over here. This is going to be this. And yeah, now we have a bunch of more information on what we wanna put in here. This is a bit harsh. Going to be reducing this information. If you happen to have like very sharp lines like this, that's basically because of the other curvature. We can kind of smooth it out. And now if we start plugging these in, we can kind of see what we're doing. So that means the slope bar is too much. We can reduce this one. I'll have a lot more natural noise here. The thing about trim sheets is that you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, but just slightly different for each bit, depending if it's the same material. So if it's concrete like this, you're gonna be using a lot of the materials over here. So I can kind of get this again like this. And that's gonna be something like this. And now we have an interesting material here. We can probably multiply this like this. And then we can more probably increase some of the other noise we're using. So looking at those noises, yeah, kind of increase this one. And this is now looking a lot nicer, also to what we would expect from the material. We can again go back and increase the slanting if we want. I also want to reduce the bevel with it here so that the edges are more prominent, like this. And then we can kind of play around with one very cool node is 3D Voronoi fractal. So that is going to, oh, sorry, not that one. So Voronoi fractal, not the 3D one, just other stuff. We can kind of start playing with this one. We can do a non-uniform directional warp. We can warp it with itself, and then we can warp it with a uniform color set to white. And that's going to give us interesting results for the most part. Something like this. Yeah. Then we can blend it with over it again with some more noises. So let's say a crystal noise. So, but we want to reduce the scale, maybe reduce the scale here. Reducing the scale kind of works the noise, but it works a little bit differently than normal kind of blurring, if that makes any sense. It don't make much sense when I'm talking about stuff. It's a bit hard to kind of try to explain what I'm doing while actually doing it. It's not ideal when you're doing stuff like this, but that's what it is, I guess. But yeah, we can now do a high blend, you know, which is kind of gonna get used of grout, and we can do a histogram scan. This histogram scan is gonna give us the mask, where this is gonna be happening. Maybe not. It's gonna have to be, yeah, that's gonna have to be inverted. Maybe. Yeah, sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, but yeah, that works. And now we kind of have a little bit of a grout going from these. Using another fan of scaling noise that much. A better way to do it is make it tile path. That way you can kind of just scaling it. You can kind of rotate it, and then you can work that again, and that's gonna give us a more natural result for the most part. And now when we're adding this here, it works nicely. Okay, so we can kind of consider this one done, and we have time just for one more small one. So I'm gonna put this as trim sheet 2. We can kind of start blending this. So that's gonna be uh, our main graph for the blending stuff. So basically, when you have like 10 different themes, you're just gonna have a bunch of them, and then you have to blend them, and just require use a lot of masks to achieve that. Now, when we kind of blend this here, we have different bits. I'm not entirely sure if that we put that into the right place. Yeah, we did. Oh, this UV bit was flipped, but yeah, that also works. Yeah, now we can see how we have like these little bit of bevels on the edges, so you don't have to bake anything down. And the next thing we can do is I'm gonna show you this little where over here what we can do. That's gonna be a bit quicker, but yeah, let's play with some more noise. So again, you're starting to get the hang of it. We're doing the same thing again at the start. just because we want to kind of see where it goes. So I believe this is the right noise over here. We have to clear this out so we can have, and that looks like the right one. And in this case, we're going to be doing a little bit of a softer noise. Sorry, softer bevel, not noise. We can do something like this. Or actually, just mirror it. See. But yeah, do something like this, where we have this little bevel on here. And then I'm going to be using a level of noise, just so we can get this a little bit darker, so we can put stuff on top of it. And let's see if I can show you some interesting stuff. So if I do this shape again, I'm gonna again using quite a bit. I do a small shape like this with a mask, and then we blend these together. We're going to kind of see same thing, obviously. Then I'm going to use a shape mapper, which will allow us to map this to some UVs. So something like this. So yeah, something like this maybe, where we don't want so many tiles, I guess. Something like this. We wanna actually get this already pattern. So now this will have all the correct edges. Because if you try snowboarding this, the edges are gonna get all wonky. Because snowboard actually works better if it's only on one direction, so on one axis. Now we can kind of we can add something. We can add a shape in the middle. So like this. And we can make the shape smaller, something like this, for example. And now we can use a tile generator. We can then put this in the image input, which is going to give us the interesting pattern over here. And then we can run stuff. It's going to scan this. We can then blend this on top. So let's see if I've nailed the scale. I haven't, but that's not a big deal. We can make this smaller, so scale, something like this. That looks about right, for example. Getting it a little bit, and I'm gonna be offsetting it. So it's in the middle. Right. So now we can get the shape and we can edge detect it. Doesn't work well sometimes, but when it works, it's pretty good. So we wanna have this multiplied like this. Sorry, multiplied like this. And we wanna then use a flip fill again. These shapes need to go a little bit higher. On here. So that's kind of minus point. Go to 0, 1. The shapes go right exactly where we want them in the middle. And if we made them slightly bigger, yeah. Now we have the other bit working for us. We can do a flood filter gradient. We can do a random gradient. We can then multiply this gradient with a noise, like let's do a crystal noise. And this crystal noise we can multiply with a crossfade with a clouds noise. And this is gonna give us a nice result, which we can then multiply. And once we multiply this, we can use a histogram scan. This is gonna give us some interesting patterns. We can then use a sales noise on top of those to further make these more interesting. So right now we can do this. It's gonna be a pattern, and bear with me for a second. Now have a lot of random tracks everywhere, which is good. I do want to make these a little bit tighter, something like this. And then we can use two again on this, and we can use flood fill to gradient again. Here we can use flood fill to, sorry, we already have flood fill. We can use flood fill to random grayscale. So now we can get this pattern that we already had. We can then use subtract. Sorry, not subtract, multiply from here. Before we do that, we want to override it again. So actually, I'm just going to copy these two. So we have the right amount of stuff. Something like this. We want to multiply this like this. This is a little bit too intense, so we want to something like this. And we're almost done with this one. Just bear with me. Right. So we have these, and we can multiply this on top. And then we can multiply again this on top. This one again has the same issue as the other one, so we want to do a distance, and this distance we want to hook to a map. And now we can kind of plug it again. Now we won't have any issues here. I want to use the levels to bring this to a better something like this. This, and then the last remaining bit is we want to offset this again. In something like this. And this is going to be our main shape for now. We can then blend this with our original shape again, so we lose all the other bits. And now we're going to be going back to the plane, so we can see what we're looking at. If we've done something properly or not. You can see this has a lot of different now tracks and images. So we want to do a little bit of a slow blow again, something like this. Not that much. We have to be wary of how much we're doing with the images. Again, I'm gonna copy now this here. Actually, I can copy probably half of this graph here. See how quickly it's to reuse stuff. And when we look the correct masks, we're kind of gonna get pretty nice result. So that's quite strong. We wanna use all of these effects. So something like this. This is quite strong again, but we wanna see how much of that we can kind of use. Yeah, it's gonna be going down a bit. This is also going down a bit. So these effects are not that strong. And now, so this, we should be able to get a decent result. Wanna reduce the contrast here, and I wanna use some edge smoothness, reduce the level, so we get something like this. And then here in the end, if we plug it, be working nice. So right now, not. See why? A lot of going back and forth. This is working nicely. I'm gonna reduce multiply here. Right. Okay, and then we can blend this with the rest of our graph over here. When we zoom out and we plug this in, we're getting something like this. So let me just go to another shape. I can show you. So that's how quickly you can make some different imp sheets. We can make them a lot better if we spend more than 30 minutes on them. But we can now put the cylinder in here, and you can see how this matches the UVs, and we have like half a cylinder that's made entirely of trim sheets. And because we're running out of time, we can kind of park it here. I would love if you have some questions for me, and in the meantime, I can show you. So if we're looking at some of these trim sheets, we can kind of see the same principles are applied in a finished material. So it's all about reusing stuff, content bricks, subworks, and a lot of different surface information to all of these. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did talking about Substance Designer. I would definitely like to thank the organizers for letting me talk about Substance, because that's basically my favorite thing ever. So hope this was as interesting for you as it was for me.